Take one. My name is Arthur Laffer. I'm an economist. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and we're here in Washington, D.C. at the W Hotel. I was in the OMB. I was the chief economist at the OMB then, and I found my friends up there in the OMB really boring, so I always came down and hung out with the OEO people. Bill Bradley was in that group, and Christine Todd Whitman, and Jim Leach, I think was.
Interns, as I recall.
Yeah, interns, and it was just a fun group of people.
Art Laffer, Dick Cheney, and I would have dinner from time to time, or lunch from time to time, or just have meetings in the White House from time to time.
In 1974, we came to the Hotel Washington, to the Two Continents restaurant. That's where we sat down and talked about tax policy, and Art drew the Laffer curve.
I invited Jude Wanniski, who was a writer for the Wall Street Journal at the time. He passed on. But he kept all the records of this stuff. And in an article much later, it was called Taxes, Revenues, and the Laffer Curve, he recounted this dinner. And so it was the four of us. And that is the dinner we're talking about today.
During that time, what we were trying to do, obviously, was manage this transition from the Nixon administration to the Ford administration. And there'd never been anything like it.
And the country was faced with some serious economic problems. And what was coming up through the system was not what I felt represented the direction the country should go. And it was in large measure coming, I think it's safe to say, from speechwriters as opposed to economists.
We were spending a lot of time on the economic program that fall.
Oh, my gosh.
We were still doing it at Vail at Christmas time.
I remember that very well. We spent a lot of time in ski clothes in the living room of the house that Ford was renting.
Yeah, the Bass House.
Jerry Ford was proposing a tax increase, a 5% tax surcharge. And so I was talking with Don back then, who was chief of staff, and Dick, who was deputy chief of staff. I said, look, guys, you're not going to get 5% more revenue with a 5% tax surcharge. Now, you may get 4% more revenue, you may get 3%. You might also lose revenue because the tax base will shrink. I drew that little curve on a napkin to illustrate that.
Just one of those events that stuck out in my mind, because it's not every day you see somebody whip out a Sharpie and mark up, the cloth napkin at the dinner table. Yeah, he was that way. He drew out a lot of napkins. My recollection is we were in the restaurant downstairs, sitting at a table about like this, and you drew the curve on the napkin. I was struck by it when you did it. Now, I never got the napkin.
But I have the napkin that's in the Smithsonian was to Don Rumsfeld from Arthur Laffer. And why, if I did that, would Don not have picked it up?
I don't want that trash.
I had to deal with this all the time. But I do all these mathematical models of the effects of taxes, which, if you know the math, it works out pretty nicely, but it doesn't have the sort of the bite, the flavor of the real world. So I would develop all of these anecdotes to try to illustrate the economics, one of which was the Laffer curve, which if you tax people at 100%, no one will work because they don't get an incentive to work, and the government will collect no revenues. If you tax people at 0%, everyone will work like mad, but you're not collecting any revenues.
Well, basically, the curve showed that with a tax rate of 0, you were going to collect 0 taxes. With a tax rate of 100%, you're going to collect 0 revenue. You shut down the economy.
It had the power of simplicity. It was a truth that could be expressed in a paragraph. We each turned to each other and said, Arthur Laffer is absolutely brilliant. My memory's not perfect. I'm 82 years old. I could be wrong.
Here's a question for you. When did Reagan first see the Laffer curve?
Well, Reagan, I used to have, like with you, Don, I used to have lunch with Reagan during the 76 to 80 period. And he'd come in, just the two of us, and he'd come in with all these paper stacks and with paper clips in them and ask me questions about it. Marty Anderson wrote in the book Revolution. He remembered the day he saw it and understood it. And he said, I just saw the president, but I don't remember that, to be honest with you. I remember doing that with the president. But politics is where the rubber hits the road. I'm not held responsible for public policy. I'm this guy sitting at the dinner and I go home at night. They actually are held accountable. But they understood what I said. They understood the context in which it was done, and then they had to take those ideas and blend them with the politics in the real world.
It clearly had an impact on the way, at least on our side of the aisle, people began to think about economic policy and tax policy and revenues and growth. So it was, for me, it was a significant moment in my own development, if I can put it in those terms.
It was so simple and so compelling that the traditional liberal view was contested. The traditional conservative view of it was contested.
It's not Republican, it's not Democrat, it's not liberal, it's not conservative, it's not left-wing, it's not right-wing. It's economics. Okay, vertical axis, horizontal axis, tax revenues.
Vertical is the tax rate, in case you forgot it. And the curve goes out like this. You may not remember that.
It's a bell curve.
It's a bell curve, yeah.
Here's 100% right here. This is a 0.
Where's Jude when we need him?
Jude should be here, though. You know, it really is sad because he made all of this stuff really happen. It was amazing. This time I'm going to make this to my friend, Dick Cheney. You got the first one and you gave it away, Don.
Pardon me?
Saving the
Oh, you're saving it?
This time he's getting it.
This time I'm going to get the
It's going to go in the Cheney Museum.
Right.
Old friends are the best friends, and there's no question but that we've all three been friends for many, many decades now. Something, I suppose, exceeding 40 years, 4 decades.
These are my two favorite people, as you can tell.
As long as we agreed with him, he liked us.
Don Rumsfeld and I have been close friends for 40 years. He fundamentally changed my life, got me off the academic track and into politics and government. Art's, I say, one of the more interesting personalities around, and so I have lunch and somebody else paid for it. Yeah.
What does it say?
That's classified.